is not yet legal in the entirety of the country, but still people were able to get their hands on or their eyeballs on imagery of professional bongs with which you can, smoke marijuana. So happy New Year to you. I hope you were interested in that kind of content. Most people flipped over to the more family-friendly fare on HGTV and other outlets, and there were some noticeable fails. Amazon had what they considered to be a satirical parody of the Rose Day Parade. No one knew it was a satire piece, so everyone thought those boring, dry commentators, who were both actually comedians, were doing a legitimate coverage of the Rose Bowl Parade. So that was a total bust. And usually Amazon is right on point. They have their finger on the pulse, but they missed it big time with that one. So what's on the show today? Well, I've got two great guests for you. On SOTR Talkers today are author Richard Lim and Professor Nicholas Grossman. They're going to join the program to discuss the presidency and world affairs. And then we also have our encouragement for today. We're going to talk about being in the new year. That's coming up just in a moment. Then in hour two, Alan Dershowitz had some very interesting things to say about the treatment that he now gets from his liberal friends and colleagues, people that used to really keep him on the cocktail party circuit. And I can tell you, if you're a conservative, you know how this feels. If you're openly politically conservative, Republican, whatever you want to call it, not a Democrat, you know how this feels. When people find out and they're liberals, they don't want you around anymore. And it's not that you've changed as a person. It's that they now know your political beliefs, and that means you're either in the tribe or you're out. And so he describes that. It's a pretty interesting listen because he says right at the outset, look, I'm a liberal Democrat. I voted for Hillary Clinton, but I have to tell the truth. I'm an attorney. I have to tell the truth about the collusion, which is that, collusion's not a crime. And that's why the Democrats are now going for obstruction of justice. This is just a witch hunt. But it's interesting because Alan Dershowitz, who I've featured on this program many times, his audio from different interviews that he's done on national news has been consistent in saying that you first have to find the crime. You have to make sure it's a crime, and then you prosecute. You have to find evidence that the person has committed the crime, and then you prosecute and hope for the best adjudication. But that's not what's happening here. They're all out of order, these Democrats. So anyway, Happy New Year to you. We're going to have a little bit of information at the very end of the show. We're going to talk about Hoda Kotb taking over the anchor chair for Matt Lauer, who is now gone. It's official. When they replace you with someone else, you're officially gone. And it's interesting because it's kind of groundbreaking. Hoda Kotb has been a fixture over there at Today. She's really fantastic because I don't know a lot about her politics. I'm pretty sure she's liberal. How else could she be in so tight there for so long? But she plays it away from the front. So she doesn't keep that out front. And I think that's really refreshing. And it's going to be interesting to see her sitting next to Savannah Guthrie. Will she be the balm to Savannah's liberal outbursts? Will she bring a few more facts to the program? I'm really interested to see what she's going to bring there. And she's keeping her hour with Kathy Lee Gifford. So she'll be on from 7 to the 7 a.m., 8 a.m., 9 a.m., which is the Today Show with Savannah Guthrie, and then the 10 with her regular position. So it's a real big up for her. So right now I want to just say Happy New Year again and get into the encouragement. And this is fun because at the beginning of the year, of course, you can find some doom and gloom. You can always think about what's horrible, or you can choose to start the foundation for what you're going into these next 12 months. And make no mistake about it, bad things are in the mix, obviously, but God has a really interesting take on this for us as Christians and anybody who believes God's word is true. The truth is the truth is the truth. And so if you're still in that kind of learning mode, and you're not yet in the family, as it were, these scriptures, the Bible is true. God's word is true. And so I just found this to be a really good scripture for coming into the new year. Isaiah 42:9, the Lord's chosen servant. I am the Lord. That is my name. I will not give my glory to another, nor my praise to graven images. So the next verse is, behold, the former things have come to pass. Now I declare new things. Before they spring forth, I proclaim them to you. Sing to the Lord a new song. Sing his praise from the end of the earth, you who go down to the sea and all that is in it, you islands and those who dwell on them. So what is God saying here? He's telling us to sing a new song. It's a new year, and we can sing a new song of praise to him. We can glory in the fact that he is still in control of all things. He's still on the throne and right here, right now with us, intimately interested in having a relationship with us and encouraging us and supporting us and working things out for our good, answering our prayers, strengthening us, and helping us to get through what is obviously life is not easy. We have a lot of obstacles that are in our path. And so what can we take from that? Well, in Isaiah 43:18-19, it says, "Do not call to mind the former things or ponder the things of the past. Behold, I will do a new thing. Now it shall spring forth. Shall ye not know it? I will even make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert." So God is telling us here that he will open the path for us when we're operating in his will. So you might be thinking, well, how do I know if I'm in his will? Well, okay, obviously it's not sin. So it's obedience to God's word. But if you're thinking, well, I want to do this job or I want to accomplish this thing in my personal life, and you think, but maybe that's not God's will. Well, God's will is always what's best for us. And the other way you can tell, obviously, is that God gives us the desires of our heart. So if you have this burning desire to turn over a new leaf with your exercising, as I've been doing, or maybe you have a burning desire to turn over a new work leaf or a new family type of a situation, new direction for things in a personal relationship, that desire comes from God because he wants good things for you. So you're in God's will and wanting that, but now you have to pray for it and really focus on it. What can you do in your own, everyday schedule to make that more closely align with what you're trying to do? That's what you can do. And then, of course, you're praying over it. So another verse that applies to this really well is Isaiah 48:6. "You have heard, look at all this, and will you not declare it? I proclaim to you new things from this time, even hidden things which you have not known." So God is the opener of those secret things. He's the one who teaches us. He makes us wise. We pray for wisdom. He makes us wise. He teaches us, which then enables us to understand these things. So yeah, scripture it's like if you just crack it open and start reading it without the assistance of the Holy Spirit, you're not going to get it. But God will enable you to not only rightly divine those scriptures, but that they will be health and life to your bones. And that's a part of walking through to that destiny, the desire of your heart, whatever that thing is, or the 3 things, or whatever you laid out for yourself for your New Year's resolutions. Not against New Year's resolutions. I just feel like goal setting should be a continual operation that you adjust and fix yourself and make sure you're going in the right way. But if you want to start fresh things in the new year, there's nothing wrong with doing that. Do it. Set those goals for yourself. You're going to make some headway, more than you would have if you did nothing, obviously. So, Revelation 21:5 says, "And he that sat upon the throne said, Behold, I make all things new. And he said unto me, Write, for these things are true and faithful." So these Bible verses apply to the old problems and the new ones. You give your problems to God and watch him work. But in your own everyday existence, you're not just sitting back, because faith is an action word. It's a verb. Faith means first you pray, you believe, and then you go forth. And there are actions that you have to take in order to, for instance, if you're eating too much, then you have to decide you're not going to eat as much, which means you might have to purchase a book or 2 or watch some YouTube videos or do something to kind of figure out, well, how much should I be eating? Okay. How much do I need to eat if I want to be smaller? Okay. Now I have to commit myself to that. You have to take some actions as well. And so it's not about there being any one area where God will work in this area, but he won't work in that. He says all things. He said, and he that sat upon the throne said, Behold, I make all things new. The Bible also says that God will restore to you what the locusts have eaten, and that what is stolen from you, he'll restore that 7 times 7. So you have this amazing God who's just waiting for you to say, help, a little help, so he can come in and help you. So that's the encouragement for the new year, that all things are new. God, we serve a God that will make all things new. all things in your relationship, all things in your work environment, all things in your exercise routine, all the things. He'll make all things new. That's fantastic and amazing and so good to have the opportunity to share with you. So that verse, if you want to share it, is Isaiah 42:9. And I actually also shared verse 10. So 42:9 and 10, Isaiah 43:18 through 19, and Isaiah 48:6, Revelation 21:5. All of those go together and talk about the newness that God has in store for us and what he offers to us as his servants. So good to have that to share. So I know you guys probably noticed, if you were reveling as some were, we didn't revel. We stayed home and we partied amongst ourselves. And then we watched Chronicles of Riddick because now the kids are old enough to watch it. And we've never, like as a family, watched it before. And it was interesting, the reactions that they had to it. And so we were doing that, and they all had like root beer floats, and I had a keto-friendly thing that I ate. Also, if you're doing keto, you can get Halo Top ice cream, which tastes like real ice cream. It's like no difference whatsoever, only it's super low carb and it tastes great, and it doesn't have any sugar in it. And so we did that on New Year's Eve, but it was almost impossible because over the weekend I didn't really pay attention to the news. I tried to stay away from it. I had some scheduled posts on Facebook, but that was about it. And then this whole protest in Iran thing broke off. And I mean, it was just like, it just broke off. I'm not sure if they thought, let's do this, it's the new year, or what the impetus for it was, but they went all in. And now we have our ambassador to the UN calling for an emergency UN session because Iran is suppressing the protesters, and they're actually, there have been protesters who've died. Now, I know the way people like to talk about how America is so horrible, and America is just such a terrible place, while they're clamoring to get in here or here illegally or living here as immigrants, where you don't have to be here. If you think America is horrible, go back to your own backwards third world nation and leave the rest of us to the fine, good things of America. You don't have to be here. So while they're complaining about how horrible it is, if you protest here in the United States, you get to go home the same way you came in. You even get to destroy property and act like a fool and still go home the way you came in. But over in Iran, where they claim they allow people to practice Christianity and to celebrate Christmas, but they don't, they're killing their protesters. So my word on that is, love the one you're with. Appreciate the fact that here in America, if you want to organize a protest, you can go ahead and have a protest, and nobody from the government's going to rain down bullets on you or kill you. I mean, I just think some people, it's like they're out of their literal minds. They can't understand the goodness and the bounty that they're experiencing here in America. And it's sickening. It really is. All right. When we get back, we'll have more. So stay there. Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk and American Family Radio.
Isn't that a beautiful sound? The sonogram holds the sound of a baby's heartbeat. Hi, I'm Will Addison, Director of Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the program, everybody. It is a pleasure to be with you today. Happy New Year to you. And it's my pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. We always have the best guests. And our next guest is Richard Lim, creator of This American President, the podcast, and former White House political appointee for the Bush administration, author and national security commentator. Richard, thank you for coming on today.
Thank you. It's good to be back. It's been a few months.
Yeah. Last time we had a fascinating conversation, which the people in the comments could not get enough of it on Facebook. So it's great to have you back. And today it's Art of the Steal. Talk to us about this.
Yeah. So we just did an episode on the Louisiana Purchase, and we wanted a catchy phrase, so we got Art of the Steal, which obviously relates to Art of the Deal, President Trump's very famous book. And I guess the premise of it is that, we all know that President Trump has, he has a great deal of success in closing deals throughout his career. But what can we learn from Thomas Jefferson, who closed the greatest deal in American history, the deal that basically doubled our size as a nation and allowed us to become the international power that we became?
Which people still to this day. So there's a video online. It's on one of the British websites. It's like UK Daily Mail or something like that. And in it, they ask Brits questions about American history. And they ask them, some of the stuff's really simple, like about the states. But one of the questions had to do with the Louisiana Purchase and also the fact that we purchased Alaska for like almost nothing. And the British,
right.
So the people in the thing, they're like regular people. So they have these, regular people reactions. And none of them got it right that we were able to pull this off back then. And so I guess it's kind of a little known thing that we Americans know about, but most people, foreigners, I guess, aren't really, that's not a part of our history that they pay attention to. But you're right to highlight this because as Americans, we should really appreciate, I feel like it's a providential type of a thing that we were able to get that much land for almost nothing. In today's dollars, it's basically nothing.
It's insane. I just did popped it into the website to adjust for inflation. It was 3 cents an acre. That's what everyone says. And adjusted for inflation, it's just 63 cents an acre today. So it's not like it's that much more nowadays. But it's really crazy. And one of the things I talk about in the podcast is just how history often seems inevitable. American history, it seems very kind of neat and linear. You go from winning independence, creating a country, and then we doubled, and then, we got more powerful, and then World War II and World War I and World War II happened. But it was so much more complicated, and the Louisiana Purchase was really based on a very unique set of circumstances, many of which were outside of our control. And there's this very famous quote where an observer said that it seems like God loves drunken men, children, and the United States of America, because it just seemed that America was just so lucky. One of the most famous things that happened that allowed the Louisiana Purchase to be completed was the Haitian Revolution. And I've talked to a few people from Haiti, and one of the things they mentioned was that America wouldn't be what it is today if it wasn't the fact that this revolution happened just a few hundred or so miles off of its shores, and it was a French colony. It just happened to be there. The French just happened to take it over, mainly because of its lucrative sugar trade. Many American slaveholders were terrified of this revolution happening so close to, American shores, but it really convinced Napoleon that, it's not worth it to have these foreign adventures, and if you can't contain Haiti, if you can't pacify Haiti, how could you hope to pacify this whole gigantic country? And at the same time, it was the Napoleonic Wars out in Europe, and it just so happened that Britain and France went to war in 1803, and he desperately needed cash. And I think one thing that's fascinating also is the fact that Napoleon was just the type of leader that would make a deal like that. He was basically giving up this massive empire in the Western Hemisphere. And a lot of other world leaders might have been afraid to do that, But we know Napoleon was brash. He was not afraid to make these big decisions. And, if you don't have those things aligning, maybe you don't have America expanding. Maybe you don't have America being a world power. It's really remarkable how that happened.
It is, but even though it seems that way when you look at it on a piece of paper, when you read the letters of our presidents and especially during the war, when George Washington wrote about how difficult it was. Yep. I mean, it seems that way now, but during the actual time, there were a lot of times where it was very touch and go. Just look at the amount of debt that John Adams took on for America. He took on all of this debt, and he really was like just continually traveling back and forth to France and Great Britain and Europe, going back and forth, borrowing money and throwing in with countries that, technically shouldn't have wanted to have anything to do with the, redheaded stepchild of Great Britain. But he was able to convince them to do these things and forged alliances that later became integral to us winning, as you said, the war for independence and even beyond that. And so I think it kind of looks like, God must love America. Well, I think he does love America a lot, but I also think it's just, so certain people had to make really good decisions at critical moments in order for the things that came together to come together to create the country that we have now. And I feel the same way about going forward in the future, that we really need critical people to make good decisions to keep the country as strong as it is and to help it advance.
Well, the people I focus on the episode, obviously Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, and James Monroe. You have three presidents right there who were involved. Thomas Jefferson, what I think a lot of people don't realize, he wasn't just this great thinker and writer, which he was, but he was a cold-blooded political strategist, and he created the Jeffersonian Party, what was called the Democratic Republican Party, whatever you want to call them. And that party, starting with him, won 7 straight presidential elections. His chosen successor, Madison, won 2 terms. Jefferson himself won 2 terms, then Madison. Then Monroe, their apprentice, won another 2 terms, and then John Quincy Adams won a term, all under Jefferson's party. And that's very hard to do. I mean, nowadays it's hard for a party to keep the presidency 3 times in a row. But Jefferson was able to create an ideology that really resonated with the American people. And he really knew. One thing I think you see in part of his success in getting the Louisiana Purchase was that he had a guy like Madison with him who was not afraid to tell him no. Jefferson was afraid that, maybe the Louisiana Purchase was unconstitutional. And so he went to, his cabinet and said, what do you guys think? And James Madison basically said, well, some of those concerns are legitimate, but this is international relations. If you don't acquire this territory now, the moment might not come again. And Jefferson was the kind of guy, as brilliant as he was, he knew that his advisors had something to bring to the table, and Madison really was the perfect guy to have with him. So I think, you see leadership there. You see guys that are willing to say, well, what does my advisor say? And they weren't yes men. They empowered people. They respected that their colleagues had that brilliance. And I think you see that with Washington too. That's why he had Hamilton and Jefferson in his cabinet, even though both guys hated each other.
Well, I think it's important that he had them there because, so what's more important than political party and ideology is having a wide range of views present from experts, people who actually have proven that they're battle tested, and then you can hear all of their opinions, and then you can make a wise decision. I don't know that we have that in either situation where, now that we have the two-party system so entrenched, when the Democrats are in power, they don't tolerate any dissension within their ranks. You can't voice different opinions and not be put out. And on the Republican side, there's a huge, I engage in it too. I'll admit it, Richard. When someone comes out of left field with something I feel isn't political orthodoxy on the right, I immediately, well, that's a rhino. That's a person who, that idea can't stand here. And what you're describing is a situation that's completely the opposite of that, where there may be parties, there may be political affiliations, but there's a lot of wide-ranging opinion coming from experts to kind of inform you so that you can make a decision. Because that what he said about the Louisiana Purchase, it sounds like he was a common sense guy. Like, yeah, there may be some thorny issues here, but this is foreign policy. And when else are we going to be able to get a chunk of land like that? And it's on, the contiguous United States. That is a part of the power silo that is created in the United States because we have both of our coasts and we have friendly neighbors to the north and the south. That's a part of the power that we have that other countries don't have.
Right. And I think it's amazing because really at that moment, the big story, what was going on in the world was in Europe. It was these Napoleonic Wars in Europe. British and French had been fighting for centuries and all that. But what people didn't realize, the Louisiana Purchase at the time was kind of a sideshow. It was like, okay, well, that's only important with how it relates to the whole situation in Europe. But what people didn't realize at the time is that it put America on a course to become the dominant power, eventually to supplant Europe. And it's fascinating because you have, these two men, you could say it was really Jefferson and Napoleon, both of them, Jefferson intentionally, but Napoleon maybe unintentionally becoming an architect of world power out in the Western Hemisphere of American power. And so history is so ironic because oftentimes these sideshows, will become the main event in the future. You just never know where history will take you.
Yeah, and that's what's so exciting about it. Now, obviously, there's not a lot of land to be acquired at this point in the history of the world. Everybody's pretty much staked out their claims. But now it's much more a decision of what we do with our geopoliticals. Some of them we call allies, but how much of an ally are they really? Some of the actual genuine allies that we have, how do we support them? It's interesting because it's all now done within the confines of the UN, which that seems to be a bit of a problem too.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I think that you had the founders who were very profoundly schooled in the idea of human nature. They understood human nature. They made no bones about it. They knew that nations have interests. And that was what they based their foreign policy on. And that's what, if you read Washington's farewell address, and he talks about permanent alliances being a snare for us because, we shouldn't put our faith in other nations to make good on their word because, their interests will guide what they do, and therefore our interests should guide what we do. And Thomas Jefferson, who at times disagreed with Washington, himself said in his first inaugural address, we should have no entangling alliances. Because, in the end, it is about America's national interests. And so I think that the founders were very keen on that. They didn't have any illusions about what kind of world we lived in. And that's why they were able to succeed and preserve our country in such a dangerous world at that time.
I'm glad they were, even though it seems like we've got all the worst kinds of people in politics now. Maybe if I spent some time looking back at the political powers back then, I'd see some of the same traits were present. And I know it was also very rough and tumble back then. It wasn't like they were sitting around with their gloves on, drinking tea and arguing with each other. They were pretty rough back then as well in the political world. But I'm just glad that we have you to uncover these. To me, the Louisiana Purchase is a story that it's a great story. It's a gem, and it's something that we should, when we're sitting around with other Americans and I don't drink beer, but a lot of people drink beer. You're, tossing back a couple of beers. We should be kind of still nodding and doing, fist bumps, that Louisiana Purchase, right? And then, I mean, that's something that's so cool.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
Well, it's the first time in all of history that much territory changed hands. One of the first time, not the first, but one of the few times that territory changed hands without conquest. And so for that, without a single blood being spilled, for that, we should be very grateful.
I agree. And also, just because it was a great deal, because I'm into, being frugal and all of that, that was an amazing deal. Instead of, some people would say, it's still a lot of acres. Maybe we should just buy some of it. And they were like, no, we're going to, that's what you're willing to let it go for? We'll take it. We'll take the whole thing. Yeah, thanks.
It's incredible. Yeah, Henry Adams, the son of John Quincy Adams, said that it ranks in importance with the Declaration itself. And I think that, for Americans don't like having empires next door, and that was our biggest problem for so long, having the French nearby. And so, when the opportunity came, it really solved our national security problem because now we have this massive buffer from any other empire. It was very fortuitous.
I agree. I'm just glad that you're covering this. So tell everybody in the listening audience how they can listen to your podcast and the website.
Sure, yeah. So our website is www.thisamericanpresident.com. We're also on iTunes. You can go and check us out there. Just look up This American President. And we have 9 episodes up. We've covered everything from George Washington to FDR, the history of women who've run for president. We try to cover as many different topics as possible. American history is an inexhaustible resource waiting to be tapped of historical wisdom. And just to learn about, America's great successes and our flaws as well, and learning lessons from that. And that's what we try to do. We just try to tell stories about history that we can learn from and make it exciting.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on with us. First show back in the new year. Talk to you again soon, Richard Lim. It's great to chat with you.
Thank you.
All right. We'll be back with more Stacy on the right after these messages. Stay there.
Physical activity is the new trend. It's not a bad thing unless it has brought a sense of vanity in your life. 2 years ago, I was not happy with the number on the scale nor how I looked. I've never been a huge person, but I was, as the old folks would say, healthy. I joined a gym, gained a personal trainer, even changed some of my eating habits. The Lord checked me one day and in my spirit said, "Why are you disgusted with yourself? Be healthy, take care of the temple I've loaned you, but do it because you want to honor this body, which is your responsibility while on this earth." I said, "You better let me know, Abba." Psalms 139 verse 14 says, "I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well." 15 pounds down, I know that even if I was to never look like Serena Williams with those nice framed, worked out arms, I am wonderfully made in His image, and so are you. With a heart for the urban family, I'm today's urban woman, Victory McIntosh. Connect with us more at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Abraham Hamilton III.
God put us in this world at this time to be salt and light. We don't fold because of the darkness that we're facing. This is not the first time in the world's history that it's gotten dark. God has called you and I to be His ambassadors, even in this dark moment.
Tune in to the Hamilton Quarter, weekdays at 5 p.m. Central on Urban Family Talk. Victory McIntosh.
Early will I seek thee, O Lord. Man, it's something about when you start your morning off right with Abba, Father. I'm telling you, will the enemy come? Of course, he's going to do his job. But it should motivate you even more. Man, I got to stay connected to the vine of Jesus. How do you do that? By getting into the Word of God. You got to do it.
Tune in to Word on the Street with Victory McIntosh. Saturdays at 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. Central on Urban Family Talk.
A dear sister in the Lord, who is a writer for the AFA Journal, wrote an astonishing article about idols. In this article, she attests to the fact that if we are truly honest with ourselves, we will find things or people whom are more important in our lives than our relationship with God. Let's just say when I read this, I did my own soul searching and found a few. There are several passages in God's Word where He tells us to not idolize things or people. Even the very first 2 commandments warns us about idolatry. In 1 John chapter 5, verse 21, John tells us to keep ourselves from idols. Idolatry is sin, and it could be your career, your marriage, your car, including yourself. John Piper says it best: sin is what you do when your heart is not satisfied with God. How do you get satisfied and excited about God? Refresh your memory of what the Savior of the world did on the cross and ask the Lord to help you make Him number one in your life. With a heart for the urban family, I'm today's urban woman, Victory McIntosh. Connect with us more at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Carl, briefly, I want to also get your perspective on the fact that one of the hallmarks of the Trump presidency has been to go after the press, calling us fake news and even worse. How does this compare to what you dealt with Richard Nixon? He was no fan or friend of the press.
Nixon in Watergate tried to make the conduct of the press the issue instead of the conduct of the president and the men around him. Donald Trump has gone even farther. He's tried to undermine the credibility of the press as a national institution to the detriment of the country by these broad attacks on the press, which really the press is in the United States, as our leaders have recognized going back to the days of the early republic, the last bastion of truth that makes democracy function. Yes, we make mistakes, and we need to admit our mistakes. We oughtn't to be too provocative, which we sometimes are with a president who's putting a lot of bait out there, and sometimes we take the bait and get a little petty. I'd like to see a lot less of criticizing on our air the president for playing golf. Let him play all the golf that he wants. I don't think that's our job.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. Stacy on the right on Urban Family Talk and American Family Radio, AFR.net, urbanfamilytalk.com/Stacy is where you can find the podcasts and listen to and share them with other people who need to be informed about these good things. I have to say that as I was listening to him, Bob Woodward, and if his name sounds familiar to you, it's because he was one of the individuals who they did the reporting that brought down the Nixon presidency. Woodward and Bernstein, that's who they were, who they still are. And they're being trotted back out by the mainstream media so that they can try to create a parallel and create a connection in the minds of Americans between the malfeasance of the Nixon administration and the current Trump administration. I could tell you that dog won't hunt. That's what my aunts and uncles say down in the South. That dog won't hunt. That this is not the same type of a thing. They want to make it into the same type of a thing because their aspirations of impeaching President Trump and getting rid of him and stopping him from draining the swamp, cleaning the swamp, reordering the swamp, and setting all things back into good working order as much as can be done with a government that employs 24 million people and overspends by 40%. Well, they want to stop him from doing that. He's systematically dismantling the Obama legacy, and they would have stopped him from doing that. And so they've trotted this old guy out, and, much respect is due. He's not famous for nothing. But what does he mean? Yeah, I agree. I'll give him the slight kudo that we agree that all of this talk about how much the president golfs is ridiculous. I thought it was kind of ridiculous at points when it was the discussion about how much Barack Obama golfed. Although I have to say, I felt like Barack Obama golfing in the beginning, I was annoyed by it. It was a constant refrain. And then after a while, I thought, well, please let him be golfing today because look at what he's doing to our country. Yeah, let's let him golf. Let's hope he's golfing today. $1 million vacations, please let him take a vacation today and stop tearing this country to shreds. He seemed to be able to multitask and tear the country up and golf a lot. So, there it is. So you've got Bob Woodward. And I guess he fancies himself as some kind of, like he can come in at this point in President Trump's administration and kind of lay down these premonitions, if you will. But why doesn't he talk about, self-accountability here? Why doesn't he talk about what the media has done to earn the ire of President Trump? It's not that President Trump is just sitting up at home, with his, his phone, and he's just making up stuff that the media is doing to him. The media has lied about him on numerous occasions. So when do they admit that not only do they lie, not only do they print things that they know aren't true, they say things they know aren't true, they go on the news and break news that turns out to be not true. But when they issue the correction, the tweet that is incorrect will have 1 million retweets or 800,000 retweets or 70,000 retweets and interactions like out the wazoo. But then the correction, 1,000 retweets. So everybody thinks that these stories that they've put out are true, and they don't mind it because if they did, they would go on and they would issue the corrections repeatedly. They would broadcast them on all of their online social media to make sure that people know, look, you know what, we put something out today and it wasn't properly vetted and sourced, and we regret that. If we saw that kind of behavior from the media, then I would agree with him about the severity of their importance and their influence and their impact and who they are, et cetera, et cetera. But the fact is, they're in the tank for the DNC. And as such, they're political enemies. They're not geopolitical enemies. They're not people we're going to drop bombs on as Americans. But as members of the Democratic Party, they are in opposition to the president of the United States. And when they say things that are false about him and his administration and their actions and the policy things that they've undertaken, they are fake news and they deserve to be called out. And the fact that they're always whining about it, only a smack dog yelps. Work with me here, people. I'm in my Southern sayings mode from down south in the home front. Only a smack dog yelps. So if you're not fake news, you're not worried about it. He called the people fake news right there. I was standing right in the media box when he was here in St. Charles a few weeks ago. I was standing right there with all those CNN, NBC, ABC, all of the networks, all the local affiliates were there, plus the major media outlets. Everybody had a camera. Everybody had somebody to do a stand up towards the end of the speech. And I was right there. I had a media credential. I was in the area with them. And when he said, I see you back there, media. I see you back there. You're filming. You're doing what you do. You are fake news. And I turned my little camera around and I panned it right over to them because I'm not fake news. My business is not to oppose the president of the United States. Even when President Obama was in office and I did not support his aims, I did not support his agenda, I didn't lie about him. And there were times where I shared stories on Facebook. I can think of 3 particular instances in his 8-year term where I shared things on Facebook. And when I was alerted to the fact that they were not true, and then I went on and vetted, I went and looked at the links that were sent to me. I looked at the original piece. I went back over the whole thing. And sometimes it would take me an hour to read through all the stuff to make sure, because I'm not going to delete something unless it needs to be deleted. And I had to delete them. 3 times that happened to me. And I did it and I posted on Facebook. I deleted that. It wasn't real. My apologies for sharing it. One time I did it. I had, I don't know, like a few hundred people leave my Facebook page. Back when I think I had maybe 40 or 50,000 people on there. And I saw a noticeable drop and people messaged me, we trust you to share stuff that's true. I've already shared this on my Facebook page and now you deleted it and that makes me look bad. I'm unliking your page. And there was nothing I could do but send a message back. Sorry to see you go. But I took those steps because I didn't want to leave stuff up slandering an individual or saying things that weren't true once I was aware this isn't true. So if I can do that on my little Facebook page and I can hold myself accountable, then why can't the big giants, ABC, NBC, CBS, all of the biggest people, MSNBC, why can't they hold themselves accountable? Why can't they just tell the truth? It's okay to oppose someone and tell the truth about them and wait for them to mess up, wait for them to make a mistake. If you know you're in the right, you need only wait because you're going to win. But no, they can't do that because they don't have any integrity. And so therefore, when he calls them fake news, if the smack hits you, go ahead and yelp. If the shoe fits, wear it, sport it proudly, be the fake news that you really are. Go around persecuting people for making memes about you like CNN does. I mean, they're like the mob over there. So it's interesting to hear Bob, make these lofty statements, but he doesn't even understand how ridiculous he sounds to people who understand how much lying has been going on about the president. And he hasn't even been there a year. People are talking about year 2. Year 2 doesn't start until after January 20th. So we're just shy of year 2. And they've already lied about him so much. There's volumes, encyclopedia length volumes that we could have about all the lies the media has told about the president. So he does warn against self-righteousness and smugness on the reporting of President Trump. And it's number 2.
We've got a deadly, serious inquiry in front of us, and the reporting by and large, by the mainstream press, by the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, the Wall Street Journal, has been some of the greatest reporting of the presidency that we have seen in the last 50, 60 years.
Amen, Carl.
That's right. But if just real quickly, the tone is a big issue here.
I agree.
In lots of reporting, particularly on television commentary, there's a kind of self-righteousness and smugness and people kind of ridiculing the president. When we reported on Nixon, it was obviously a very different era, but we did not adopt a tone of ridicule. The tone was, what are the facts?
And I do think they ridiculed Nixon a little bit, but compared to what they're doing now, it's like he can get away with saying that because compared with what they're doing now, they openly mock the president. I'm not just talking about SNL and all of those, their hacks, those unprofessional hacks, people who used to be funny, people who used to have a show that everybody liked to watch regardless of their political party because they knew everybody was going to get hit. They knew that the funny stick was going to beat everybody, and they were going to make everybody a point of to be laughed at. They were going to bring everyone up and give them their moment to be mocked, but no more. They can't even bring themselves to figure out something funny to say about Hillary Clinton. They're too busy worshiping her. She lost. How do you continue to worship a loser if you're holding up a narrative that says that loser lost unjustly because she really is the one who should be the president, and the one who is the president is illegitimate and unworthy of the office, et cetera, yada, yada, yada. Keep whining, keep crying because you lost. That's what's going on here. And so, sliding on into the new year, we thought we would see them, they need some time to lick their wounds. They need some time to, it was going to be tough. They were going to have a long road of, working through the stages of grief. They hadn't even begun to work on the stages of grief. They are in complete denial as to what happened last year in November. The American people were sick to their eyeballs of Barack Obama meddling in our personal lives, telling us what we could and couldn't eat for lunch for our children, who we had to go to the bathroom with and be in the changing room with as women. There are a ton of different social issues that Barack Obama was on the wrong side of that propelled voters to the voter booth. Now, yes, there were 2 million, 3 million people who, tipped the popular vote for Hillary Clinton. There are also 11 million, 14 million. Who knows how many tens of millions of illegals are living in this country. And now we have documentable proof that those individuals have been voting. So that's why the popular vote, don't come at me with that either. And so while they're still rehashing it, we're over here winning like nobody's business. And I'm not just talking about the Dow and, the stock market and the tax reform bill and the bonuses that have been announced. Because, unbeknownst to many, it was a news story. You might not have seen it. AT&T gave out huge bonuses to their employees, but they also laid off a bunch of employees at a plant. So it wasn't all good news for AT&T employees, and that's a part of the market. So it's not that I'm all rah about it, but I'll tell you this. This time this year in a Clinton presidency, we would have still been reeling from the after effects of having someone who sold the office out before she ever attained it. The Clinton Foundation would still be in operation, and they would still be receiving donations from foreign entities and powers, buying access to the presidency of the United States and everything that we hold dear as Americans. The Louisiana Purchase may have been our biggest, best deal that we ever did, right up there with the Declaration of Independence. Absolutely, Richard Lim is right about that. But if Hillary Clinton had been president, the biggest selling off of America would be going off right now. Every bit of our sovereignty up on the auction block being parsed out like garbage at a fire sale with the Clintons reaping all of the benefits. So there's winning, and then there's understanding what you've avoided. Have you ever been driving down the road and all of a sudden a tire pops up or a box or something that someone has carelessly dropped off the back of their vehicle and you don't see it until all of a sudden it's right there in front of you, and you swerve and you either drive over it or you swerve and you miss it by just a hair. and you're like, whoo, thank you, Lord. Whoo, I missed that. That would have tore my undercarriage up or would have tore my wheels up. I might have spun out. And so you avoid that accident. That's what we're doing right now. We're all wiping our brow and thanking God. If you're not, you should. Thank God that we have a president who loves this country and is working out his faith on a daily basis instead of that shyster Hillary Clinton. We avoided an enormous mess. So now what? They'll keep investigating him until the cows come home, and we'll keep winning because he's going to keep governing like he said he would. That's pretty good stuff. When we get back with Hour 2, we'll have more Stacy on the Right for you. Happy New Year. Stay right there.
Urban Family Talk. Urban Family Talk.
In this 40th year celebration of the American Family Association, we invite you to help us remind America once again of the truth behind our national motto, In God We Trust. You can do your part and display your faith with an In God We Trust car decal from the AFA store. Order yours today at afastore.net. That's afastore.net.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. Much of the U.S. continues to be punished by bone-chilling cold. Jeff Manasso has more.
There are wind chill advisories and freeze warnings for another day from Montana to Texas to Maine. It feels like minus 22 in Duluth, 8 below in Montgomery, Alabama, with warming shelters now open there, to Georgia, to Hillsborough County, Florida.
Even though we're from New York, it's pretty cold today.
This is brutal. I love the cold weather, but didn't expect it to be this cold.
Schools are also closed in Oklahoma and Ohio as freezing cold expects to stick around for a while for much of the country. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
The man police say shot and killed a Colorado sheriff's deputy was the subject of a warning by Wyoming officials in the months before the incident. Tanya J. Powers reports.
More than a month before police say Matthew Reel shot and killed a Denver sheriff's deputy, police in Lone Tree, Colorado got a call from campus police at the Wyoming College of Law warning them about Reel. Reel had been a former student there, and warnings went out on campus because of social media posts critical of professors at the school and told students to call police if they saw him or his car near campus. Early Sunday, Douglas County, Colorado sheriff's deputies came under fire after responding to a call involving Reel. Deputy Zachary Parrish was killed. 4 other deputies were hurt. All have been treated and released except one, and he's expected to be okay. Reel was killed by the SWAT team during the attack. Tanya J. Powers, Fox News.
Baltimore has set a new record for murders. Rachel Sutherland reports.
There were 343 killings in Baltimore in 2017, almost one a day, bringing the annual homicide rate to roughly 56 murders per 100,000 people, the highest ever. Some people blame police, accusing them of taking a hands-off approach since 6 officers were charged in the death of Freddie Gray, who suffered a spinal cord injury in police custody. His death sparked riots in Baltimore. In Washington, Rachel Sutherland, Fox News.
A writer at a conservative think tank is asking the question, will the Trump administration have the conviction to push back against the transgender policy the Obama administration put in place? More from Bob Kellogg.
Even though the Trump administration rescinded the Obama policy instructing schools to open restrooms and locker rooms to all students, Jane Robbins of the American Principles Project says it's not clear on how far those in the Department of Education will go in reversing the old policy.
But there's clearly sentiment within the department, even to the very top, for at least maintaining some aspects of the Obama policy.
Robbins says the guidelines issued by the current administration are murky and leave those concerned with the matter scratching their heads.
It was written very much as a political document, as though they were trying to go far enough to satisfy conservatives without going so far that the LGBT people, who are very powerful and very loud, and I mean the activists, would excoriate them for it.
Robbins says people on both sides of the issue are confused. I'm Bob Kellogg.
A family from Florida was among the victims in the crash of a chartered plane in Costa Rica that left 12 people dead.
Mitchell and Leslie Weiss and their 2 teenage children lived outside Clearwater, Florida, and were all killed when that small plane crashed in Costa Rica. Their neighbors, like Spencer Hornsby, are in mourning.
A neighbor that's a good neighbor down the street that you sit and you talk to and you find out about their kids and what's happening in school. And
the Weisses were doctors, Mitchell a radiologist and Leslie a pediatrician who helped treat Hornsby's child. Both practiced at nearby Morton Plant Hospital. In Miami, Eben Brown, Fox News.
Today's a busy travel day, and Tamara Johnson with AAA says it's important for motorists to plan ahead when driving home after the holidays.
Try to avoid those busier cities during peak travel times, which would be early morning rush hour and later evening rush hour. And then also make sure that you're mapping out a good route.
American Family News is online at onenewsnow.com. I'm Rusty Pugh.
Lonnie Poindexter.
Don't ever ask God for patience. Just say, oh, Lord, help me to be more patient. No, don't do that. Well, why, Lonnie? Why shouldn't I do that? He'll give it to you, but you're not going to like how you get it. Well, Lonnie, what do you mean? How do you get patience? Trials and tribulations, my brethren. That's how you get it.
Lion Chasers. Weekday mornings at 10 Central on Urban Family Talk. Welcome to Stacy on the Right with your host, Stacy Washington.
For it to be a crime, the campaign would have had to say to the Russians, look, we want you to hack. For it to be a crime, the campaign would have had to say to the Russians, look, we want you to hack into the Democratic National Committee. Here's the names of the people. We'd like you to get information about them. That would be accessory before the crime of hacking. But just collusion. If the president and his campaign say to the Russians, look, if you help me get elected, we'll help you with sanctions, that would be terrible politically, but it simply wouldn't be a crime. You know, before something can be a crime, you have to find a provision in the federal criminal code that makes it a crime. Maybe it should be a crime. But right now, it's not a crime. I would be saying the same thing if Hillary Clinton had been elected and people were railing about her, lock her up, lock her up. You have to find a specific crime. You just can't make it up. What I'm afraid of is both are trying to politicize the criminal justice system. That's why I proposed right at the beginning a nonpartisan expert commission with people like Justice Souter and Justice O'Connor sitting and investigating what role the Russians tried to play in this election, other elections, looking forward to try to prevent it in the future without pointing fingers and saying, lock her up, lock him up, everybody's a criminal. That doesn't serve our interests.
Yeah. Well, okay, so that's his opinion. It doesn't serve our interests. The president has to say something about this witch hunt that's being executed upon him. Welcome back to the show, everybody. Stacy on the Right, hour 2 of the program. Really enjoying getting back into the groove after a fantastic holiday. My first time ever taking off a week over Christmas where I didn't do any radio fill-ins for anyone. None of the national hosts that I will fill in for, local hosts, any of that stuff. I didn't fill in for anyone. And I just took the time off. And then, of course, the week after, I caught the cold that I guess is going around to everyone. I won't say it's the flu, but it was pretty bad. And so I was sick, hacking up a lung, and now I'm back, and I believe I'm fully healed, y'all. I believe I'm fully healed. And I have to say thanks to my producer who said, I was talking about how the kids bounce back so quick and they go to their basketball practices and they do all that, working out. He was like, you have to do that. You have to get up and sweat and, kind of basically sweat it out. And so I've been doing that, and I'm feeling better. I'm actually feeling better. So great advice on the part of my producer. And I'm really glad to be just back in the chair, ready and raring to go for 2018. And so that was Alan Dershowitz that you just heard there. And he's been under some serious pressure because he's a Democrat and he's been running around telling the truth about what collusion is. And so he wasn't done talking there. He went into how it's a total mistake to allow political partisans on Mueller's team. He feels Mueller is nonpartisan. He feels that Mueller would, if the investigation was into Hillary Clinton, he would go after it with the same kind of fierceness that he's utilizing on investigating President Trump. I don't know about that. I don't know Mueller the way maybe Dershowitz does. I haven't followed him that closely. I think it's worth listening to. So here it is, number 6.
I would have thought that maybe Mueller would be less partisan. I don't think he's partisan. I don't think he cares whether the Democrats or the Republicans benefit from this, but I think he's a zealous prosecutor. Yeah. And if he were going after Hillary Clinton, he'd be going after her with as much zeal. Now, that's not true of some of the people on his staff. He should never have allowed these people to serve on this investigative staff if they had the points of view that they've had toward Hillary Clinton and toward Donald Trump. That was a mistake. When you're going after a president or a presidential candidate, you have to be Caesar's wife. You have to be above reproach. And he didn't do a good enough job in vetting the people that he brought onto the prosecution and investigative team, and that hurts his credibility.
So should he step down?
He shouldn't step down. What he should do is bring on board an ethics advisor to make sure none of these problems recur. Again, somebody like a David Souter, somebody who's above reproach, and let that person decide the difficult ethical issues. Let him go forward. I think at this point, he's going to lean over backwards to make sure he's perceived as fair, because so many people think there's at least the perception of bias against Trump.
There's not just a perception. The text messages between Agent Strzok and his girlfriend, it's not a perception. There's legitimate bias there. And others within the Mueller investigative team have the same kinds of allegiances to the DNC/Clinton campaign. They're dyed-in-the-wool Democrats, and they see President Trump in their own perverted, warped, nonsensical, completely, kind of just out there. They're gone. They're mentally incapable of completing their duties in a nonpartisan way, because the majority of their thought processes revolve around a hatred of President Trump. And so I know that in the listening audience, there are people out there who don't like President Trump, and more power to you. You do you. But you're thinking, well, that shouldn't preclude them from doing the job. Well, it shouldn't. Also, eating lots of carbs shouldn't make you fat. Also, over the holidays, none of the calories should count. Also, if you work out 5 days in a row, you should automatically lose 10 pounds. Do you see where I'm going with this? Yes. There's a lot of stuff we could say that shouldn't be. But do we not live in the real world? Do we not dwell amongst the common sense and the reality of human nature? In fact, Richard Lim, I have to refer to him again, it was a good interview. He said that the founders really knew human nature. So if we know human nature, we know that in a hyper-partisan, politically divided, very fractious environment that American politics currently is, we know for a fact, we know without a shadow of a doubt, we know that this is absolutely not the case. So yes, it should be that people who love Hillary Clinton and probably have little bobbleheads of her like I do. Y'all, let me move my head. There she is. Actually, she's over this shoulder. Do you see that? That's a little Hillary Clinton bobblehead that I got deeply reduced after she lost the election. I bought it with that Trump bobblehead. See that one? Do you see that? That's Donald Trump. I bought those because they were cute and because I have a bobblehead collection. And so I needed someone to go with Condoleezza Rice and Lieutenant Uhura and John Adams. And then me, that little one with the incredible suit on, that's me. So anyway, I had to, so these are people who, they don't have the bobbleheads because they were on sale. They have the bobbleheads of Michelle Obama, Barack Obama, and Hillary Clinton because these are their pseudo gods. They have a religious type affection for these individuals. And so if you're that kind of a person, why wouldn't you just say, for the sake of all that's good and holy, and certainly so that I can maintain my integrity, I've got to let this investigation go. If Mueller asks me to join the team, I'm going to have to decline But you know why they're not doing that? Because, again, study the human nature. If you read the text between Strzok and his girlfriend, they believe they're doing this higher calling, this job that no one else can do in ridding America of President Trump, of preventing him from coming into the office fully so that they can then eliminate him through impeachment by any means necessary. So if you understand that, because you have to start from somewhere, your understanding has to begin from a place of reasonability and from the facts. And the facts as we know them is that there are many, many people working in the Department of Justice and the FBI that are not just what we would call politically partisan. Exhibit A, politically partisan. That's me. Why? It's Stacy on the right. What do you think that means? But I'm in media. I do opinion journalism, and I do a conservative Christian talk radio show in which I'm speaking about the issues from my perspective. So we're not breaking any news stories over here where I'm doing investigative reporting and bringing you fresh stuff. Maybe on Second Amendment type issues, but not really. That's not where I'm operating from. So for you to say, well, Stacy, you're a partisan, obviously, I told you first. You ain't tell me anything I don't know. But what about these people? They claim that they're in an investigation into collusion between the president of the United States during the campaign, during the part of where before he's president, he's actually on the campaign trail and he's colluding with Russians. And they purport that that's a crime, but it's not. It's not a crime for the president to collude. It's politically inconvenient, but it's not a crime. We just heard Dershowitz say that. So it's not me. I'm not playing a lawyer on TV. It's Dershowitz who said that. And he's a Democrat, a dyed-in-the-wool Hillary Clinton supporter. But he still believes the rule of the law is higher than that. So these people believe they're doing a service for the citizens of the United States of America by ridding them of someone who's unfit to hold political office. Once you understand that, once you read the text messages between them and understand how they feel about President Trump, once you see that they consider him to be an existential danger to the democracy, this is a republic, but whatever. You know, if you're wrong on 10 facts, you might as well be wrong on 100. And then they're operating within that vein to try to stop something that they see as a cataclysmic negative event in the history of this country, then it starts to kind of come together and make sense, doesn't it? So here he is. I'm looking at, we have time. We're good. Here's Dershowitz at the end of this interview, and this is not the whole interview. I just clipped the pertinent portions. He's talking about how his liberal friends stopped inviting him to dinner. They think he's a Trump supporter just because he's telling the truth about what the law says about collusion. It's number 7.
What do you think of the president talking about you in the New York Times interview?
You know, it's always mixed. My liberal friends have stopped inviting me to dinner. They think I'm a Trump supporter. I'm a liberal Democrat. I voted for Hillary Clinton. I just call it the way I see it when it comes to the law. If the president likes what I'm saying, fine. But tomorrow he may not like what I'm saying. Wow. I am not his advocate. I'm an advocate for the rule of law. I'm an advocate for the Constitution.
Good. Well, and an advocate for America. You got to be true to yourself. Alan Dershowitz.
I agree with that.
So he described, and so he doesn't sound like he's whining or anything. And this isn't me saying he's woe is me or anything, but as he's describing how this clip made the rounds all over, like when he said it, it just immediately kind of went viral all over the place because you have this openly Democrat man who has been telling the truth about collusion. And he admits that he's not an advocate for President Trump. In fact, he seems to have some very critical opinions of President Trump. You know, I dare say he does not think that President Trump is a good president. And so he's made those statements, but the only statements that people are paying attention to because he's a Democrat are the ones where he explains, according to the law of the land, how collusion is not a crime. It's politically inconvenient and it is a negative instance if the president were found to have colluded with Russia, that would be highly detrimental to him and the entire Republican Party. It would hurt candidates down the ballot, and it would mar the reputation of the Republicans in a similar fashion to what happened after Nixon stepped down from the presidency. But it's not a crime. Additionally, he talks about some of the other instances, some of the other things that have been brought forward as possible accusations and reasons for impeaching the president, and he debunks those. Not because he wants a President Trump or he's happy about President Trump, but because the man has some integrity. So I've not liked everything that Alan Dershowitz has said about the President of the United States, Donald Trump. But I can respect someone who says the law is the law is the law. We've talked about this on the program. As Christians, we have to have enough integrity to say, if President Trump did commit a crime and it was something that was an impeachable offense, I would have to be right there and say, as horrible as this is for our country, he has to go. As someone who, my first vote I ever cast was for Bill Clinton, because I was a Democrat back then in my 20s. When he had the blue dress thing and he went on TV and said, it depends on what the meaning of the word is, I said right then, he's got to go. He should be impeached and he should step down. And I was pretty hardcore back then. I would shout you down to the rooftops. I used the race card. I was pro-choice, if you will. But I recognized then, in the flower of my youth, in my 20s, that he had to go. So we should respect individuals like Alan Dershowitz, who's putting his own private life on the line to tell the truth about the president. This country has to be more important than our political affiliations. All right. That's the music. When we get back, we'll have our next guest for you. Professor Grossman. He's coming on today to talk about Iran. So perfect. Stay there. We'll be right back.
Hey, here's some great news, and we could all use some great news for 2018. If you're worried about your healthcare costs or you feel like you're missing out because open enrollment is over, well, it's not too late to join MediShare. You can sign up anytime, and think about this. The typical savings for a family with MediShare is about $500 a month. Think what a difference that would make to your budget. Again, that $500 a month is the typical savings. It could be more or less for you. Definitely worth taking a couple minutes to find out. There are over 300,000 MediShare members sharing each other's medical bills, and something they're now loving, MediShare has a telehealth program that lets you log in
Welcome back to the program, everybody. Happy New Year to ya. Stacy Washington. I'm also the co-chair of National Center's National Advisory Council, Project 21, and write frequently for America's First Freedom, the magazine. And I'm really excited to be back with you and live on the show today. Thanks so much to everybody who's listening on traditional radio, the app, the live stream, the website at urbanfamilytalk.com, and for those who are listening in on the podcast, where we have those on iTunes and Google Play where you can subscribe. And of course, the Facebook pages and the YouTube stream that's now going as well. Thanks so much for listening in. It's my pleasure to welcome a professor of international relations at the University of Illinois, Nicholas Grossman. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Hi, Stacy. Thanks for having me, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. So there's all this protesting going on in Iran. Help us to understand what we're seeing here.
So it seems like it started with objections over the economic conditions of the country, that a lot of the benefits, to some extent recently, of Iran has had a lot of economic pressure, but a little bit of economic growth recently, and it really hasn't delivered for a lot of average people. And so it seems to have started with economic causes, but it quickly spiraled into general protest against the government. And it's the largest protest in Iran since in 2009, after an election that many Iranians claimed was stolen. And this time it's taking place in many different cities. There have been hundreds of thousands of Iranians. It's gone on for about 6 days now, and it's not really clear where it's going to go. The government is starting to react more harshly, starting to react with force, and people, at least so far, are continuing to protest. And it seems like what they're mostly protesting is against the government, against the theocratic system, against women being forced to, in many ways, be treated like second-class citizens, and adhere to various religious dictates. But it's hard to tell from the outside. I don't even know if the protesters themselves have a really concrete agenda, because it doesn't seem like a well-organized thing. It's not as if there was a group that got together and started the protest, that organized it around a specific issue. It's been more spontaneous than that.
So what we're seeing that we don't really understand is that the people have gathered together to protest, and you've outlined a number of different reasons why they might be out there, but that their government has responded pretty harshly, and there are people who've died. I thought I saw on Drudge that there were 12 people who'd been killed in the protests. So clarify for me, are the people being killed by other protesters, or is it the Iranian government, military, police? Are these police actions? How are these people being killed?
So I think it's up to 20 already at this point, and also with information that's spotty. And of course, the Iranian government has an incentive to downplay it, so it may be even higher. But mostly it seems like they're being killed by government security forces. There's two variations on this. So there's the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, which is not the regular military. It's more like a combination of elite forces and people that are dedicated to protecting the Islamic Republic specifically, as opposed to just national military to defend Iran from outside. And they have been more organized, showing more force. And I saw a video just recently that some Iranian was able to get onto Twitter of Iranian Revolutionary Guard running over a protester. Wow. And in addition to the Guard, there's also a group that's called the Besiege, which is best thought of as like pro-government thugs. They're not really a government agency, but there are a few 100,000 of them, and they take to the streets when there are big protests, the last time really seen in 2009, and intimidate people and beat people up. And so while it's not entirely clear which of those, I haven't seen any evidence indicating that, say, some protesters are killing others. It's more pro-government forces, both the organized people that work for the government and also this group, the Besiege, that are pro-government without being explicitly a member of the government.
Oh, okay. So, as usual, Nicholas, there's never any easy answer. Yeah, it's these guys over here. They're doing it. It's so So what are you expecting? Are you expecting to see the protests continue on, indefinitely, or do you think the Iranian government will finally get a clamp on it by, mass arrests or whatever kind of despotic, response they finally come up with?
I think that one's hard to say. If you made me pick one, if I had to guess, I'd say that they'll probably get a handle on it, that they'll use more violence, that they've already tried, also trying to cut down on communications lines, cutting off internet access in various locations. And the biggest difference that with the 1979 Islamic Revolution, when they overthrew the Shah, one of the most telling things was when the government security services stood down. So some of them even joined the protesters, but mostly was they refused to shoot their countrymen, to stop the people that were protesting the government, and that was when the Shah and his top people knew that it was over. And I haven't seen any sign that the Revolutionary Guard or other security services are really turning on the government. There have been a few videos that came out of, say, Revolutionary Guardsmen who was sent to go and, beat up or potentially even shoot at protesters and said, this isn't why I signed up and, didn't join. But we also have to remember those are the things that people leak out, that get spread around on Twitter and elsewhere by people who are hopeful that there will be some sort of internal change in Iran. So I wouldn't expect to see a total change, but it's worth noting that the government must be watching this and being nervous, that they have tried for many years since 2009 to deliver some reforms because the protests there were fairly large. It was when Mahmoud Ahmadinejad got reelected as president, and the numbers were widely off. There was even something where one of the candidates, Ahmadinejad, got more votes than some candidate from that candidate's hometown, and it was even more votes than people who live in the town. So there was something clearly fishy about it. A lot of people protested, and in response, after the Iranians put the protest down, there were at least some reforms, but they clearly haven't delivered as much as people want. So I guess that they put it down, but try to at least meet some demands in the process.
So what could, we're talking about a government that is, the whole premise of the current Iranian regime is command and control. It's not freedom, it's not liberty, it's not, modernizing their society. Those are not things that they want. But if you talk to Iranian people, if you talk to individuals who have family back in Iran, but they live in the U.S., they'll say, oh, the Iranian people want a modern society like they had before the mullahs came to power. They want, free elections. They want women to be able to, roam around freely and dress like modern women without the burqas and all that. And they want to return to a more secular society. And so some of these protests have to be because people are hoping they can get that done. But, what is the chance that the government there, the mullahs, what's the chance that those guys will relax some of the restrictions they've placed on these people in order to bring calm to the situation?
Probably pretty high, at least a little. So I think you're right that overall the Iranian population is well-educated, a lot of them more worldly, especially in urban areas, but not exclusively, than a lot of the other countries we think of in the Middle East, certainly, say, compared to Saudi Arabia. And some of the changes that they've already started announcing, things like the police won't arrest women who don't wear a hijab, a headscarf, anymore. I don't know if that's the sort of thing that will last, but that's something that they could try to throw a bone to the protesters. I also don't know if the protesters will be satisfied about it, because what they really want is a real say in their government. And so when we've been talking about these elections and they were stolen, it's important to keep in mind that these aren't what we think of in the U.S. as free and fair elections. There's the Guardian Council, which is unelected group of mullahs who get to vet candidates. And to give you an idea of the numbers, in the just election,
oh no,
100 people wanted to run, and they only let 6.
Okay, 100 people wanted to run for what were they running?
1,600 some odd people wanted to run for president.
Okay.
And the mullahs said only 6 of them are allowed to, that no one else was allowed to run. So as much as there was an election where it did decide between someone who was more moderate, Rouhani, who had been the president already, and some that were more hardline candidates. So they allowed them to run and allowed people to make that decision. They still said to almost all of the people who wanted to run for president, sorry, you're not allowed, only these 6 approved candidates. So even though there were elections, it's not what we think of as really a democracy. And that's what a lot of the Iranian people want, a real democracy.
I would too. I mean, because as you said, the chance to really enact changes that last, like not arresting women for not wearing the hijab, well, if they can change their mind about that in 90 days when the world is no longer so closely watching, then, you know, what's the point? It's kind of like you just get a little reprieve and then people are getting arrested again. And that's something that's so simple and so it's just really, honestly, Nicholas, it's hard to imagine. Like when you sit down, if you sit down for a couple of minutes and just think, what would it be like if I could never leave the house without having my entire head covered? I would be arrested all the time because I would not only want to not have my head covered, but I would be also wearing short sleeves and all that. I just remember it from being on a temporary tour of duty to Saudi Arabia and knowing that I was under command sponsorship, so I was protected, but I still had to abide by the rules. So I could have my head out, but I had to have on, you know, a T-shirt with a round collar and it had to be long sleeve. So that meant sweatshirts, you know, because my wrists couldn't show, collarbone couldn't show, ankles couldn't show, and I was an American citizen. I could drive, but that was before women were allowed to drive in Saudi Arabia. So, you know, it was an oddity for me to be driving out on, you know, on the roads in the city that we were in. So it's just one of those things where we don't even think about that, but this is the way these people have to live.
Right, and Iran is not as harsh as Saudi Arabia, but there are also restrictions like men and women couldn't be in soccer stadiums together. You know, so say women wanted to go watch a soccer game, there were rare times where they allowed it to be a women-only crowd, but mostly just, you know, sorry, you're not allowed to go. And similar thing with running for president. You know, when I said that they cut out a lot of the candidates, over 100 of them that said, I want to run, were women. And the government said, you know, there's no women allowed, sorry.
We want to run, and they're like, nope. No women allowed, like the soccer stadium, like that. That's just
right. Yeah,
it's just ludicrous. Well, thank you so much for coming on today and kind of unpacking this for us a little bit. We'll have to have you back to kind of update us because I feel like as much as I learn about the politics of the Middle East, I still come away from it feeling like it's worse than one of those movie plots you never get. Have you ever watched a movie where at the end you were like, what was that? That's what the politics in the Middle East are like for me. As much as I learn, there's still more to learn, and it never makes sense.
Sure, I study it for a living, and I feel that way sometimes too.
Well, that makes me feel a little better. Thank you so much, Professor Nicholas Grossman. It's always a pleasure to speak with you. Professor of International Relations at the University of Illinois. Thank you for your time today, and Happy New Year.
Thank you. Happy New Year.
All right. Talk again soon. So I'm not surprised by the fact that I said I last read that there were 12 people and who were killed, and now the number is up to 20. In fact, I was over on the Right Scoop, and they might have updated numbers. And kind of relatedly, another piece that I wanted to kind of go over, I'm looking here to see if they have any updated information on, guys, in addition to that, some truck plowed into pedestrians in San Francisco, and Kim Jong-un is asking for peace talks with South Korea because apparently the overtures that have been made by China to try to smooth things over with them, which are kind of spurred on by the United States, those overtures are actually finding traction with them. So that's good news. But the biggest thing that I saw today that I thought was really interesting, and I'll go over both of these, is Haley, UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, calling for an emergency UN session over Iran's suppression of protests. She says that the United States of America is going to call an emergency UN session both in New York and Geneva over Iran's suppression of the protests that have sprung up. And there are going to be multiple emergency sessions. And she says the UN must speak out. In the days ahead, we will be calling for an emergency session, both here in New York and at the Human Rights Council in Geneva. We must not be silent. The people of Iran are crying out for freedom. Here it is. So far, at least 21 people have been killed in the protests. And all freedom-loving people must stand with their cause, according to UN Ambassador Haley. So that's important, too. And then other breaking news, Orrin Hatch is not going to run for re-election, which opens the door for Mitt Romney to come out of retirement and run in Utah. You know what's so upsetting about this? And you can see some of the interchanges I've had on Twitter during the show as I was seeing this story. It is just amazing to me that Mitt Romney can't just go be a granddad. He is rich. He can do anything he wants to do. Instead, he insists on being in politics. And you know why the liberal establishment, the Republican establishment, the Never-Trumpers want Mitt Romney in the Senate? Because he would stand as the direct opposition to the President of the United States. Jeez. We'll be back with more right after this.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, geologist and president of the Institute for Creation Research. Dr.
Welcome to today. It's 2018 and we are kicking off the year right because Hoda is officially the co-anchor of today. Let's give her a round of applause. This has to be the most popular decision NBC News has ever made, and I am so thrilled.
I'm pinching myself. I think that we should send some medics to Alexandria, Virginia, where my mom has likely fainted after hearing the open of that show.
By the way, it's a tradition around here, you know. Let's play it one more time.
Cuppy.
Wait.
One more time.
And Hoda Kotb.
Okay, just one more time.
And Hoda Kotb.
All right, that's it.
Pronounced right and everything.
It's so exciting.
Wow.
Hoda, you are a partner and a friend and a sister, and I am so happy to be doing this.
Well, there's no one I'd rather be sitting next to in 2018 than you.
We're going to celebrate all through the morning. Oh, by the way, we have a hashtag because, you know, it's 2018. Savannah Hoda today, if you want to pass along your congrats to my friend here. And yes, my co-anchor.
Oh.
And Matt Lauer tweeted his congratulations. So the circle is complete. Replacement of a man with a woman. I'm happy that it's Hoda Kotb and not someone else. I'm not even sure who was under consideration. I think they were really concerned to bring someone up from the inside. And I think they made the right choice in choosing Hoda. She is very non-controversial, very, middle of the road, well-liked by their audience. And even people who aren't big Today Show fans, you can't find anything wrong with Hoda Kotb. So, good news. I was wondering what they were going to do about that, if they were going to bring a man in from somewhere else or maybe elevate one of their current hosts. They got that guy from MTV. He used to be from MTV, and he does like the Orange Room or the Orange Couch or something like that. Maybe they thought about him, but he was kind of on the young side to be sitting there next to Savannah Guthrie. So it was a good choice. Welcome back to the show, everybody. Call lines are open 866-963-2037 if you want to call in and weigh in on the program today. In our last segment of the 2-hour program, it's interesting looking at the news that's been kind of flying around and circulating. There's just been a ton of other things that have been going on that have to do with international politics, like Israeli lawmakers just nuking any future peace negotiations with the Palestinians. So this was another piece of breaking news that was out today. And it's about from the Times of Israel, and it's about lawmakers approving a bill in the early hours on Tuesday that requires a special 2/3 majority vote in the Knesset to relinquish any part of Jerusalem to the Palestinians under a future peace accord. So any future peace accord that requires any part of Jerusalem to be relinquished to the Palestinians would require, in order for it to become law, it would require a 2/3 vote in their parliament. This is fascinating. The bill passed its second and third readings by a majority of 64 in favor and 51 against, and one person abstained. The law, which was proposed by Jewish Home MK Shuli Molam Raphaeli, had the coalition's backing. It's designed to make it much harder to divide the city, which Israel sees as its undivided capital. The Palestinians claim East Jerusalem as the capital of a future state, which is just them basically saying, you'll never be rid of us. We're always going to be right in your face, and we're going to want part of your capital in order to do that. And now they've said they're not going to do that. With no provision in the basic law specifying how it can be amended, it was possible to overturn a law that was passed in 1980 and amended in 2000 that said no authority that is stipulated in the law of Senate of Israel and of the Jerusalem municipality may be transferred either permanently or for an allotted period of time to a foreign body, whether political, governmental, or any other similar type. And this bill was originally proposed, the bill to make it a 2/3 majority required to release any part of Jerusalem. It was originally proposed over the summer, but it did not make it through the procedural process. And so in fall recess, they went to fall recess and it didn't happen. So the goal of the bill, and at the time, this is Molam Raphaeli talking, the goal of the bill is to prevent concessions as a part of diplomatic deals. Jerusalem will never be on the negotiating table. The state of Israel will not allow for the establishment of a Palestinian state within its capital in Jerusalem. Get it into your heads that Jerusalem was the capital of the Jewish people and will remain the capital of the Jewish people for all eternity. I like it. Be firm, be strong. Also, this vote kind of indicates that the right-wing pro-Jerusalem lawmakers, they're there to stay, at least for the foreseeable future. And so over at the Right Scoop, he says it's easy to see how this could lead to the invasion of Jerusalem written about in Ezekiel 38 and 39. If the Palestinians can't have East Jerusalem in the peace negotiations, then the only way to get East Jerusalem is with a really big Muslim army. And then he says, so buckle your seatbelts because it appears that the day of the Lord draws near. All right. All right, you. Settle down. Settle yourself down. So that's a pretty interesting development today. So I'm heading over to the conservative treehouse because that's where you have to go if you want to like have your finger on the pulse of what's going on. And one of the things that I find so fascinating is that everybody's so upset about America saying we're not going to send $225 million to Pakistan. Like, so is it just me, or because that's 1% of the total amount of foreign aid that we send out? It's like me saying to the kids, I'm not going to give you, $1, or, you can't have any dessert today. That doesn't even work with our kids anymore because they know at some point they're going to be able to get dessert again. That's not even that's not even playing hardball. That's not even playing at all. So they're not having dessert today. Okay, whatever. And they go to school. So you can always get something dessert-like at lunch. And then what's the point of that? That's kind of like what this is. It's a pinprick. It does nothing really. I mean, we really have to go hard if we want to, start pulling back major aid. And I will look at that in just a minute. Here's my little list. I will look at that in just 1 second here. It says the administration is withholding $255 million in aid to Pakistan. Now I'm looking on here. This list is in alphabetical order. Let me see if I can find Pakistan on here real quick. Okay. So America currently gives $777 million. $777 million. I get the number back here. $508,870 a year to Pakistan. So $255 million is nothing. It's nothing. We should say we're giving you $100 million. That's what we should say. And keep all the other 600. So we're giving them $750 million a year. We should keep most of that back and just give them something. Just something to say we still gave them something. So it says the administration is withholding $255 million in assistance to Pakistan. There are clear reasons for this. Pakistan has played a double game for years. They work with us at a time. They also harbor the terrorists that attack our troops in Afghanistan. This game is not acceptable to this administration. And that's according to UN Ambassador Haley. And then you've got, just the whole, I mean, I just don't see how it's a big deal. It's only $225 million. It's not a big deal until they start taking the chunk of it away, the massive, large portion. All right, good. So we're going to go to the phones. I love taking calls from the listeners, especially when we're transitioning into the new year. We're easing on in. Pastor Norman from West Point, Mississippi. Hey, thanks for calling the show today. Hi, you got to turn your radio down.
I was taking a little bit of the issue with your talking points on the Mueller investigation.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that you might be a little bit off on that, in that those two people who had extreme views were taken off of the investigation, and I noticed Republicans keep talking about that as though they're still on. But they were taken off, which was the right thing to do. I think most people know that Mueller is a Republican. Most people know that Mueller's investigation will clear the president if the president had not done anything wrong. So I don't understand what all the rancor is about on trying to get rid of Mueller.
Well, I'm not trying to get rid of Mueller.
I'm old enough to know what happened with Nixon. Republicans were saying the same thing,
right,
about Nixon.
Yeah, I'm not accepting any correlation, Pastor, between there's no correlation between those two. So the whole idea that we're going to trot out Woodward and Bernstein and that Nixon is going to be synonymous with President Trump is absolutely spurious, and it's not something that I feel like is a part of a serious conversation, first of all. Second of all, I don't want to get rid of Mueller. I have at no point called for Mueller to be removed from the investigation. Third of all, the reason why we're still talking about Strzok and his girlfriend is because they were there up until just recently. So the investigation has been tainted by their participation, and they're not the only ones. There are others in that world, Mueller's investigative team over at the FBI, who have the same kinds of feelings that they had. And so, as Alan Dershowitz said, they should have some kind of ethics person come in to vet the people who are remaining to make sure that this kind of anti-Trump sentiment no longer remains. And I don't really care what Mueller's political affiliation is. What I care about is everyone on the team should be committed to justice, not committed to removing someone they see as a danger to the United States.
Mm-hmm. But it seems as though you're indicating that the only people that should be investigating Republicans are people who are affiliated with the Republican Party.
No, I didn't say that at all.
It sounds like to me that any Democrat is going to be a partisan. And I think you have people on both sides in the FBI, and I think these people, by and large, are capable of doing their job. I don't have that fear that you have.
Well, I don't think so. We disagree on that. It's not that I think they all have to be Republicans. I think they have to be committed to the rule of law and their mandate as a part of the Federal Bureau of Investigations, their mandate as a part of the Department of Justice, and their mandate that they sign on for when they say they'll be a part of the investigative team that Mueller is heading up. And so when you see people like Strzok and the girlfriend who were allowed to operate with impunity and no one called them out on their behavior, if they were texting like that, they were certainly expressing those types of sentiments to others that they work with. That means there are others still working there who hold the same sentiments. So I'm interested in a full investigation that brings forward the truth.
I'm saying you don't really know that. You're just assuming that.
No, I'm looking at what's been reported. I'm not assuming anything. I'm looking at what's been reported.
You have to also assume that just as Mr. Mueller got rid of those people when he found out about it, he would get rid of anybody else that would have that kind of mentality when he found out about it. And because if not, we're going to get to the place in this country where we won't be able to get anything done if it's not all done by a Democrat or if it's not all done by a Republican. That is just not going to work. And I think that what's going on, I believe if this president has not done anything, he will absolutely be exonerated. I believe that. And so I say let it go forward. I think we need to leave that alone. I think as believers, we need to be praying to the country and praying to the president. I think that's what I believe, man.
I agree with you on that last part that you just said. I agree with you that we need to pray, and I do. I pray for the presidency and for those elected in authority over us, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, because they're all operating on behalf of the people. What I don't think I agree with you on is that we can be assured that Mueller is going to get rid of anyone else who has the same sentiments as Strzok and his girlfriend. And I think, first of all, because he should have known that beforehand. The fact that this is coming out now, the fact that he's just now getting rid of them after he's been investigating for more than 6 months, indicates that he has a knowledge vacuum. He's not aware of all of the affiliations and partisanship of the people who are on his team. And so you've got 2 people gone and everybody else is still there. And all of these people have connections to the Clintons. All of the people on his team, all of them, they donated to the Clinton Foundation. They donated to the Clinton campaign. That's definitely not okay.
Obviously, he's unaware of what Flynn was doing, Papadopoulos was doing. So that is, you can't hold that against Mueller.
Yeah, I can.
You can hold that against Trump.
Of course I can. Of course I can hold it against him. I absolutely think that he's looking at the investigation, and these people are looking at what they can do for their party, which is the Democrats. But I do appreciate the call. I love it when someone calls in and you actually have a grip on what's going on and you disagree agreeably, and I appreciate that, Pastor. That's been the first show of 2018. We are on our way. We're barreling down the month of January. We're in it to win it. We'll be back with you tomorrow, Lord willing, with more conservative Christian talk here on Urban Family Talk and American Family Radio. You can find me online at stacyontheright.com and Twitter at stacyontheright. Thanks for being here. God bless. Talk to you tomorrow.